SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
State Treasurer David McRae has put millions back into the hands of Mississippi citizens, expanding the state's affordable college and career savings program and also returning record amounts of unclaimed money. Check out how Treasurer David McRae's office can help you, your business, or your organization. Treasury.ms.gov.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have with us today Mr. Alfred Smith, a Lincoln County gentleman. Grew up, actually, I believe you said you were born in the Little Bahia community.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Alfred is a veteran of the Korean conflict, served during the Korean conflict in the Navy, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as he shares his experiences with us. Now, Mr. Alfred, you were actually born in Little Bahia. You weren't born in Brookhaven in the hospital.
Little Bahia.
You were born in the country.
Yes, sir.
Now, you know, your dad, did he have a farm? Is that what you actually grew up on the farm?
My dad was Jimmy Lee Smith. And
okay.
Everybody probably knew him. He lived at 95 years old.
How about that?
And my mother was Tiny Belle Parnell. And her daddy, my grandpa, was the first county agent here for Lincoln County.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So where did you go to school, Mr.
Hikes
Alfred?
Retreat.
Hikes Retreat. I actually remember that school. Not while it was open, but I remember seeing it before they tore it down or it fell down, whichever it was.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now you went to school at Hikes Retreat, and you graduated in what year did you?
1950.
1950. Well, the Korean conflict was starting to heat up.
That's
right.
And
they were drafting guys, but you decided not to be drafted.
Right.
Tell us that story.
Well, see, I left here and went to Natchez and went to work for International Paper. And in Natchez, they had a reserve center.
A Navy Reserve.
Navy Reserve Center. So the draft was getting pretty warm. So I decided I didn't want to be in the Army. So I said, I'll just get in the Navy. So I joined the Navy Reserve. That was sometime in 1950. And then, of course, we cruised along. I'd go to a meeting, you know, mostly now and then. And then in 1951, about November, they give me my paper. Says, you report to so-and-so December the 6th. That's 1951.
All right, so you actually got activated. You got called up.
Yes, sir.
From the reserve unit. And where did you end up having to report to?
Bainbridge, Maryland. There was one barbed wire fence between that and the North Pole. I went out there in the wintertime, you know, the snow about waist deep.
It's cold.
Yes, sir.
All right, so you spent some time there in just more advanced training?
14 weeks.
14 weeks.
Basic boot camp.
All right, and then from there you went to?
Well, when I got out of boot camp, of course, I was kind of engaged to my wife, and so we got married at the boot camp there.
Wow.
And then we had 14 or 15-day leave, and then I went back to Norfolk. I was assigned to the destroyer, USS Corey, DD-817. And
now, where did you actually join the ship?
Norfolk, Virginia.
At Norfolk, okay.
Yes, sir.
And so from there, you headed to?
Well, we hung around there for 2 or 3 months, and then we headed for the Mediterranean Sea, which was called the Sixth Fleet back there then. It was a whole, let's see, not a battalion, but it was destroyers and escorts and cruisers and battleships and aircraft carriers.
So your ship was a part of that conglomeration of other ships.
That's right.
Now, the destroyer, for those who may not be aware, is extremely fast.
Right.
It was famous during World War II and in other engagements for being an anti-submarine ship.
Right.
But its biggest responsibility was just an escort. You were there to protect the other big ships that weren't as fast and as maneuverable, and so that's basically what a destroyer did.
That's right. And then on the way over, I don't know, we'd probably been gone a week. Of course, it took us about 31 days to get over there. But we were gone about a week, and they began to have these night maneuvers. Now, the night maneuvers is where the aircraft carrier, you know, these planes would leave and go out and run their mission and come back and land on the carrier.
Right.
And we had a terrible experience. I don't know, the Hobson was ahead plane guarding, and we were behind plane guarding. And I don't know, they got the wrong signal somehow, and that Wasp was the aircraft carrier. It run right over that Hobson and sunk it.
Oh, the destroyer Hobson was a part of the escort team.
That's right.
And they got their signals crossed, and oh my goodness, had a mid-sea collision.
Right.
And sank the Hobson. Were they able to save many of the crew?
2 or 3.
Oh my goodness! And a crew for your size destroyer was about how many?
About 180, I believe.
Good gracious!
Went to their watery grave, you know.
Good gracious!
And
wow! And the Wasp was a very large aircraft carrier.
Right.
My goodness!
See, it just knocked the plug out of the Wasp, so it was so much bigger. But it sunk. It cut that Hobson, I guess, half in two, and they just went to the bottom of the ocean.
And I'm sure y'all spent most of the night trying to look for survivors.
We stayed there 2 or 3 days, and we had the funeral at sea, and then we took off. And
headed back for the Mediterranean.
Right, headed on the Mediterranean. Of course, the Wasp had to come back.
Had to go back to Norfolk.
It had to go in reversed, what you call that, on account of that big hole in the front.
Keep the water from coming in.
Right.
All right. So you continued on with your crew and ship, and tell us a little bit about your mission in the Mediterranean.
Right. Well, we were just kind of in standby, and of course we'd have battle runs, and of course our biggest weapon on there was a 5-inch twin mount on the stern and the twin mount on the bow. And then, of course, we had the 20 millimeters, and had some torpedoes. And but now we would have these. In other words, they'd cast this alarm, and we'd have to go to our battle station, and then we'd fire for maybe 2 hours, and then they'd cease fire. Now, we couldn't see what we were shooting. We were just shooting,
You're doing what you were told to do.
That's right.
Now, battle stations is what would happen, and you didn't stay on battle stations because that was the highest alert status for a ship. But it could go, battle stations, that alarm could go off at any time, middle of the night or in the middle of the day or whatever you guys were doing. And it was imperative to get there quickly.
Right.
And be ready to fight, not knowing when you might sight an enemy.
That's right.
All right, now tell me a little bit about your experience on board the ship. What's it like living with 180 guys? Now, how big was that carrier? I mean, the length of it?
Yeah, I think it was about 24 foot wide and about 180 foot long. It was.
That's a lot of guys in a small space.
It is. But,
I guess everybody got along or had to get along.
Oh yes, sir. They seen that you got along.
So tell me a little bit about what you did.
Well,
your first assignment on ship.
Yes, and before we left Norfolk, I was chipping paint and painting. Because Navy don't want anything rusted; they want it, chipped and painted. And then I kept somehow or another. I fooled around the galley up there, and they put me on a job to get supplies for the cooks. So it wasn't too long till I'd still fool around the galley to have something to do, And
probably get something to eat too.
Oh yeah, and of course you make friends.
Sure.
And especially with the cook, you don't.
That's right.
You can't go down the street and eat. You got to eat what's on the boat.
That's right. You want a first name basis with a cook. Right.
But anyway, the chief one day told me that they had a cook going to get discharged and asked me if I wanted to be a cook, and I said yes, sir. I'll take it. So. They started training me as a cook. Of course, a cook, he's got it made. He's got about 5 or 6 what we call Jack of the Dust. That's what they call them. They have the apron. They do all the cleaning up.
Well,
all you do is mess up and cook.
That's right.
And they clean up, And
that was a pretty good job.
And anyway, the Navy, though, is just a different language. You got to learn the whole language about no such thing as a dining room. It's a chow hall, or the bathroom is the head, and the doors is hatches, and it's
and you can't say front and back because it's the bow and the stern.
Bow and the stern. You can't stay right and left because that's
starboard, port. That's right.
And it's just had to learn a different language,
Well, it's neat to be hearing these stories. We're going to take a short break, and we'll come back and visit a little more of Mr. Alfred Smith, a Navy destroyer crewman.
College baseball is back. Your favorite teams in the best matchups of the season. And nobody covers America's pastime like Sports Talk Mississippi. Afternoons on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back. We're glad to have with us today Mr. Alfred Smith, lifetime Lincoln County gentleman who was born and raised in a Little Bahia community and is here with us sharing his experiences as a crewman on the destroyer that he served on, 2 different destroyers, and I hope we have time to talk about the second one as well. But you were talking about you were in the Mediterranean, and you were there for about 10 and a half months, I believe you said.
That's right.
And you spent, fortunately, you were probably able to spend some time in port as you restocked your stores and things. And that had to be an incredible experience, because how old were you at that time, Mr. Alfred?
Probably 21, 20.
And here's a 21-year-old from Little Bahia, Mississippi, Lincoln County,
right,
over in the Mediterranean, seeing these absolutely beautiful old historic places. I bet that was an experience, wasn't it?
It was quite an experience.
Does any of those ports, any places that you saw stand out? That was one more memorable than the other?
No, no. They were all about the same.
Pretty incredible.
A lot of rocks, a lot of very few trees, a lot of rocks, and a lot of old buildings, and
amazing
people begging everywhere you went.
Now, what year would that have been roughly?
That would have been 1951.
See, that wasn't too long after World War II, and
right.
Europe was still feeling the effect of the war. Wow, incredible. Well, let's talk a little bit. It was interesting. You were sharing some of the things about a ship is unique, and everything that the crew has to have to live has to be on board.
That's right.
Because you may be at sea for an extended period of time, just like your trip over from Norfolk to the Mediterranean took you how many days? You say
31 days.
31 days. So you got to be able to survive with what's on the ship. Tell us a little bit about drinking water.
Well, we made our own drinking water.
Made your own water.
Right.
All right, tell us about that, please.
I don't know how they made it.
What the process was?
Right, I don't know.
I guess they took, but they used the salt water.
They used the salt water and made, got the salt out of it, and that used what we drank.
Well, tell me what it tasted like. Did it taste okay?
Oh, yeah. You couldn't hardly drink the coffee. Of course, I quit drinking coffee in the Navy because once you get seasick on coffee, and seasick together, coffee don't taste good anymore.
Oh, my word. But now, we were talking earlier about the role of a destroyer, and of course it had to be prepared, and the crew had to be prepared for dealing with the enemy in any capacity, be it a submarine or a surface ship. Your role when the battle station's alarm went off, what was your role as part of the response to the battle stations?
Yeah, I took off of the stern, double mount, 5-inch projector. I was projector man. It weighed 54 pounds.
Well, tell me, what did you do? What did the projectile man do?
Well,
now you were inside of a little room,
right,
where those 2 guns, a double mount, was located.
Yeah. Well, you see, you had a ammunition room down in the bottom. Then you had little old elevators that brought up your powder. See, the powder can was about 2.5 foot long, and when it come up, the man would take the powder and he'd throw it in the where it's supposed to go. Then the projector would come up. I'd grab it. It weighed 54 pounds, and throw it in there and push your breech too.
Now, the projectile was the explosive part of the round.
That's right.
But it wouldn't work without the powder, the charge behind it. So it took the 2, and then you would close the breech.
That's
and
right.
You were ready to fire.
That's right. Just like a shotgun shell. If it don't got no powder, you don't have no projectile.
So how quick could you reload and fire? How quickly could one round follow another round?
Well, it depends on whether they want it rapid fire or whether they want. See, they can fire that thing from down in the control room.
Right.
You can close it. And then they can fire it when they want to down there.
Okay.
You might stand there 5 minutes before they fire it,
But if it was rapid fire, how many rounds were you throwing in? I'm just thinking how that was a 50-pound projectile.
Fast as it could come up. Well, I'd say 4 or 5 a minute.
So there were times if you were doing something like that, it got pretty furious.
It got pretty
in there.
hectic.
Pretty hectic.
If it was rapid fire, you was just about like cutting pulpwood, you know.
Now, what was the noise like? Was it loud?
It's terrible.
It was terrible.
You had these, you had to wear these earmuffs, but it was still terrible, you know.
Really interesting. Now, you served 10.5 months, and we're about 3.5, 4 minutes left here, but I want you to tell me the story about as your group, I'm assuming it was the entire group, was going back to the States, got into a typhoon, a terrible storm.
That's right.
And it lasted several days.
2 or 3 days.
3 days. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about what that experience was like.
Oh, it's terrible and awful, as the man used to say.
Terrible and awful.
Right. Way as high as this building, and the ship would roll, and you'd say, well, this is it, you know. This is the last roll.
There's not a whole lot you can do. I guess if I remember a little bit about Navy, you batten the hatches and you turn the bow into the wind.
Right.
So, I mean, but still you were catching the waves and you were rolling, which meant you were going from side to side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And what was the rest of the crew doing? Praying?
Praying. Praying and holding on.
And that went on for
2 or 3 days.
Now, you were telling me that, of course, stuff, I guess you had everything as secure as it could be, but I'm sure there was still stuff coming loose and you were having to re-secure it and things like that. But what were you saying when the storm was over? What happened to that particular ship? Oh,
it was destroyed it so bad till they put it out of commission. That's the reason I went to the Sarsfield, the next destroyer.
So after that typhoon, that United States Navy destroyer, which was really well built, it had to be taken out of service because the storm had beat it up so badly.
That's right. It just by the grace of God we made it, you know.
Wow.
And then, I was transferred to the USS Sarsfield in Key West, Florida.
And you were telling me a little bit about that. We've only got a short moment or two, but I want you to tell me that was really tough duty, wasn't it, down to Key West, Florida?
No, it was just like a banker's. You go to work at 8 and come back at 3 every day.
You had a regular run, in other words.
Right.
You had something you were responsible for, and the ship would just do what it was supposed to do, and you came back and you were docked there at Key West.
At Key West.
But it was the good thing was your wife was able to join you.
That's right. That's right. And, of course, we had a little I got out a couple months early on account of we were out one day and it got rough. And they were going to cook fish. And it was too rough to cook fish. But the chief said cook fish. They cooked fish. And they set that thing on fire.
The galley?
The galley. And it was so bad they had to send it to the dry dock. So that was going to Charleston, South Carolina, so they just put me out at Key West, and I just hung around there 2 months, and they discharged me. I come home.
You got to come back to Mississippi.
Yes.
Wow, what an incredible and interesting story you've shared with us, Mr. Alfred. It's I want to say how much we appreciate you coming in and taking the time this morning to tell us a little bit about your experiences serving a country. And let me just say once again, on behalf of the United States and all of its citizens, thank you for wearing the uniform of our country, for your service to the United States and to the United States Navy. And just thank you again for coming in and sharing with us.
Yes, sir. Glad I could help.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.